The last time we spoke about Sony's PlayStation move to an all-digital future in 2028, the messaging we were seeing from pundits and games media was one of just give up, running with articles kind of all parroting the same headlines that Sony had reported a record-breaking 85% of PlayStation's game sales were digital in Q4 of its last fiscal year, which, if you took those reports at face value, I admit they could sound quite ominous. If gamers were choosing digital at an 85% rate now in 2026, what was it going to look like when 2028 rolled around? However, the thing about those reports is that none of games media actually took the time to dig just a little bit deeper under the surface into what Sony was actually lumping into that category of 85% digital, like battle passes and Fortnite V-Bucks, along with games that saw an only digital release, naturally skewing those results. When given the opportunity to choose between digital and physical, thanks to information made public through things like the Insomniac leaks, we could see that games like God of War Ragnarok, Ghost of Tsushima, and The Last of Us Part 2 were seeing consumers pushing towards physical sales versus digital. Armed with the knowledge that the 85% wasn't exactly the entire and whole truth, gamers and fans were able to push back with enough energy that it looks like the pro-digital, pro-Sony PR machine has now pivoted over to another angle. Those discs you own and value, you shouldn't count on those being around for very long, once again pushing buy digital narratives. Games Rant ran with a study from the Canadian Conservation Institute, which, I gotta be honest, I didn't even know existed. Anyways, this group says that Blu-ray discs are expected to remain usable for only 10 to 20 years. Continuing on, of course, with one of those headline makers that's been making all the rounds through games media, that those game discs you own, well, they're actually degrading from the day that you get them. So now, we've switched from a push that digital has already taken over with 85% digital purchase rates, so, we should just give up, to now we've got a narrative of, hey, be careful, those discs you own, they are literally falling apart in their cases. Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. Now, most times with these articles, you see a couple of responses from members of the news site, but with anything Sony related, especially one that's a hot topic like this, the comments were pouring in. Scaremongering in order to downplay phasing out physical. Here's another that says this is clearly fake research funded by companies who want to end physical media. I have audio CDs dating back to the start of the 90s that still play. All of my Saturn, PS1, PS2, Xbox, GameCube, Dreamcast games still play perfectly. If they are specifically talking Blu-ray, then my PS3 games from 2007 still play too. And you've got this final one down here that says, I am still playing GameCube discs, and they are well over 20 years old. It really comes down to common sense though, right? I mean, if you're taking care of your discs and not using them for, say, drink coasters or even throwing them at your roommates like Frisbees, been there, done that, they're gonna last. And that's the general sense you get when you comb through this article. But such is this new public pivot we are seeing, especially since Sony is completely dogpiled and ratioed anytime they attempt to post anything on Twitter or even on their own YouTube channel. So much so that studio partners who have oftentimes paid thousands upon thousands of dollars to have PlayStation promote their games are getting hit with Sony strays and overwhelming amounts of no disc, no buy comments, and even community notes. We've seen posts like this tweet from the creators of Tito, which was at the receiving end of this PlayStation post Backlash, saying, oh my god, our game just launched and PlayStation posted our launch trailer? 400 comments? What? I wonder what people think of our game. Oh no. As they scroll through the comments. I mean, it's a bloodbath of no disc, no buy, F Sony, and the like. Even when Sony posts something about their own games, like their first party titles, they're getting ratioed. Like, for instance, the Marvel's Wolverine Ain't No Hero trailer, which now has 1.1 million views and a near 50-50 split, with 59,000 likes to 53,000 dislikes. But the comment section is the thing legends are made of. 13,000 plus comments, with nearly all of them having some mention of discs and or physical versions. So when you see a pro PlayStation post pop up, that's a lot of P's by the way, saying that the physical movement is dead, it's, well, as you can see for yourself, it's clearly not. It's still just as potent as the day it began. And Sony knew it would be, which is why they issued their strictest ever restrictions for employees and what they could and could not say, with the emphasis being on say nothing, at least according to Alanah Pearce, who formerly worked at Santa Monica Studios on the God of War 𝐓𝐴 upcoming release, who says that Sony knew everyone would be pissed off with their all-digital announcement. And when you combo all this news, the bot and engagement post along with the PlayStation Network going down yesterday, yeah, it points to a rocky future and dangerous game that Sony is betting on. So, let's get into it. When it comes to Sony PlayStation, there's some out there that have said they were completely blindsided by the community backlash, and they, meaning Sony, had no idea the absolute morass that they were walking into. You've got others out there that say they knew it was going to be bad, but they were still surprised when the internet melted down. And now we've got Alanah Pearce's statements kind of on the, they expected a freaking nuke to go off into the spectrum. Quote, Sony already knew everyone would be pissed off. They knew this. People working within PlayStation first-party studios told me Sony had the strictest social media guidelines for this particular thing they've ever seen issued. Sony does somewhat regularly tell employees what they can or can't say about certain things. I was under a lot of guidelines when I was working on God of War 𝐓𝐴. I still am. And they did send me guidelines regarding what I could say on the day the game was announced. But in this instance, it's apparently the strictest the employees I spoke to have ever seen regarding public communications. They would only have done this if they knew it was going to be an enormous PR issue. This is no surprise to them. Believe it? Maybe you don't believe it, and there's certainly a bit of divided feelings when it comes to Alanah Pearce overall, but this one has the strong possibility of actually being true because as much of a knucklehead move it is for them to go full digital, at least when viewed by us, the gamers, you'd think that after what we saw from the Rockstar GTA 6 announcements and getting a lot of pushback announcing that Grand Theft Auto's physical edition was nothing more than a code in a box. Again, you'd think somewhere, someone at Sony thought, our all-digital announcement is going to be nuked by the entire gaming world. Leeching off of the Sony announcement, we knew we would see other gaming giants hitch their wagons to the news, and of course, Ubisoft did not disappoint. PlayStation killing discs has upsides, Ubisoft boss 𝐓𝐡𝐻𝐚𝐢 says, pointing to cheaper consoles without disk drives, quote, we think it will not disturb too much the industry. Now, does 𝐓𝐡𝐚𝐢 really think that there are true upsides to no more physical discs? Yes, I'm 1,000% convinced he does, just none that benefit you, the gamer. Now, we've already seen analysts and former ex-PlayStation execs say the quiet part out loud when they've admitted that digital game prices will not get cheaper just because physical discs disappear, which is a major issue within this keep physical games alive movement. You see, when PlayStation is left to just their own devices, games are left at full price even years and years after launch, while the physical market and outside retailers offered up real value to gamers' wallets. Why pay $69.99 or $79.99 on the PS Store when you can go to Walmart or buy a physical copy on Amazon for half that price? Not to mention the fact that Sony has already proven to consumers that they are ready and willing to take away your digital purchases when licenses are not renewed with no advance warning or ability to file for a refund. These are products that consumers have paid full price for, and Sony, through their EULA, have come in and taken away those purchases. So now not only will we as gamers and consumers not have the ability to find cheaper prices outside of the PlayStation Store, not only will we lose the ability to share games with friends and family or to buy them secondhand for much cheaper, but Sony will also have total control over said purchases, denying us access to them whenever an online game servers become too expensive to maintain, or when, like in the case of the recent missing movie purchases story, when Sony can't manage to renegotiate contracts with outside media companies, effectively terminating any ability for someone who purchased the product to actually access that product. As if Sony's week couldn't get any more interesting, almost as if it was queued up by the gaming gods themselves. Yesterday, we once again saw just how fragile this all-digital dystopian future can get. You see, for thousands of PlayStation users, they weren't able to access their games and media libraries as the PlayStation Network was down, leaving them unable to gain entry to their accounts. Now, it was later identified to have been an issue with AWS's servers, but three things were made very apparent during yesterday's outage. First is that Sony is not prepared with a proper and robust digital infrastructure for what is actually coming their way. Now, there were some rumors circulating around that the outage was due to the Marvel's TOKON beta and that it must have been the rush of gamers trying to log in for that beta that was actually crashing the servers, which I think was reported afterwards to not be true. But could you imagine that if players logging into a single game's beta could potentially do that, what would happen when Sony flicks the switch and makes this entire digital storefront the only way to purchase, access, and or play its games? That would be scary, but it's not far from reality. Secondly, with this all-digital future and with no contingencies in place, you get a sense for just how fragile this entire PSN thing truly is. Outside server issues instantly take away a consumer's ability to gain access to their purchases. Now, I was around and remember the 2011 Sony security breach when Sony's network was down for over 3 weeks. And that was 3 weeks when you could not go online. It was 3 weeks with no multiplayer. And that was 3 weeks when, if you had purchased a game digitally, you just could not play it. Now, luckily for me, I had my physical copies, so I could play offline mode, like Skyrim, MW2's campaign, and Battlefield 3's campaign were there to give me some use out of my PlayStation console while we went through that outage. Plus, we once again were reminded of just how porous Sony's network protections were, as during that 2011 outage, 77 million users were affected, including names, addresses, and potentially credit card information that was stolen. And finally, with the current state of the PlayStation Network, specifically the fact that roughly 68% of the world does not have access to said network, what are those consumers supposed to do when the physical and secondhand market is nuked come 2028? I guess the question that Sony has not yet answered is, do they view that 68% of the world as expendable, perhaps thinking that the other 32% will carry their financials in 2028 and beyond? I can't see that as a viable plan, and even when someone can create a PSN account without breaking the terms of service, Sony is also assuming that person has reliable, high-speed internet to download a game or to play it online, which we've seen is not often the case. Whatever way the obvious issues are approached, Sony is definitely making a dangerous bet here that is built on a fragile infrastructure with no backup plans for consumers. Furthermore, they seem to be constantly moving the goalpost, framing and reframing the issues, using games media to create an ever-changing headline to distract fans and gamers from the true heart of the issue. We've even seen reports from Moore's Law is Dead that Sony is now apparently deploying social media bots to help push back against the digital pushback. For Sony, it's been a hell of the last few weeks, even now grasping for straws and pointing towards reports like we recently saw from Circana saying that only 7 PlayStation games have sold more than 100,000 physical units year to date. And they're using that as evidence that physical media is already dead and we just need to accept it. But as we saw with their 85% digital claims, this data is only one small slice of the bigger picture, but that's just the way Sony wants it. Get just enough data and story into circulation that makes the cause seem hopeless, send out third-party announcements to get ratioed, and even when their network goes down, just stay silent. But as always, that's just my 2 cents on it all. And here's where I turn to you and ask that you drop a comment about the entire Sony situation. In turn, those comments turn to conversations, and those conversations help stoke the YouTube algorithms to put this video out in front of even more viewers. And keeping this story alive and out in front of viewers is ultimately what we all want. If you found the video informative, please hit subscribe and ring the notifications bell. And before I go, I'd like to say thank you to all of our hardcore channel supporters. Until the next one, this is Lieutenant Buzz Lightyear, signing off.